State. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Starting a little bit behind, but thanks for being with us for our fifth book club, if you could believe it. Fifth meeting. We've been covering a lot of ground, and I know the portion of the reading for this week was a little bit lengthy, so thanks for spending your time to read it. And we're through part two, which is great because I think that gives everybody quite a bit of context related to the investigation in advance of a week that I think this is going to be on a lot of our minds, being the 60th anniversary of the incident on Thursday. And so just good for us to all have this information at our disposal. And just really good to have you all here. And Jimmy Z, good for you to be on with us. Thank you for sharing this. And so I think without further ado, we can just cover the many things that this portion covered here, which and maybe we could go somewhat in order. And there was a lot of ground to cover. I think the first thing would be the lie detector test at the Leyden Motel, which is just an important piece of the larger puzzle here, where the Franklin Park robbery gang that included Michael LaJoy and Joseph DiArgento and Patrick Shang, they were involved in that Franklin Park robbery heist, which we talked about last meeting. The end result was that they all started to look at each other as who was the informant, because they did such a bad job with that September 1963 bank robbery that they just assumed that somebody had to be the rat. They couldn't have bungled it so bad. And it ended up in that motel room, which is now an auto zone in Melrose Park. And Mom and I, is it Melrose Park? I might be wrong about that. I don't know. But wherever it was, Mom and I went a few
That's
years ago.
Melrose Park.
Melrose Park, just to see it. And it's an auto zone, which is kind of weird. And that piece of the robbery, the lie detector test, just as a reminder, will come back up later in the 1968 trial against Richard Kane and William Dodano, who Dodano is the fellow who ordered the lie detector tests be taken across the street there. So at the end of the chapter,
Recording in progress.
Richard Kane famously kind of threw the lie detector results in the toilet and said nothing to worry about to his partner, William Witzman, and that will be brought up much later. So I don't know if anyone has, I'll just leave it open if anybody wants to talk about that or anything else about chapter 17 or beyond. All right,
Well,
I'll just
so you said so none of the gang was determined to lie on the lie detector.
yeah, it seemed like there was no result, like that somebody lied. They had a gun on the lie detector test, which I don't think that's very way to get scientific results, is to put a gun on on top of the lie box and say don't lie. But they that's what they did. And the one person who did not show up for the lie detector test that night was Guy Loverboy Mandela. And I think, saw, oh, you haven't seen what happens to him yet, but he is not there. And so a lot of people are kind of thinking that he might be the informant, and that later they went to his house and did a lie detector test on him individually, and he continued to fail, but was also drinking a lot. So it's sort of up in the air. It seems like he did fail, and there was just kind of a shadow over him. And if you remember, Loverboy Mendela is also the man who allegedly was the driver at the Gulf Mill Sears robbery of the getaway car. And he was spooked that somebody wound up dead in the process of that robbery, that he could not drive the car, and allegedly was taken off of the wheel. And Patrick Shang got in the front seat and drove to Lutheran General Hospital, where the switch car was switched out. And that is sort of the story. So these are the same folks, but this is, remember, just months before March 14th, 1964. So later in the year of 63. This is all kind of building up.
And Tom, so the September bank robbery, then were they out on bail when they allegedly did the first hold up and murder?
Yeah, they would have been on out on bail during that time. And because that was the September 1963 robbery was a bank robbery, meaning it was a federal crime. The FBI was involved. There was certainly a lot of legal expenses that were piling up for these folks that would have been, and then also gambling debts as well for several of them too. So legal debts, gambling debts, potential of going away to the federal penitentiary and leaving their families behind. They were pretty much caught dead to rights for the Franklin Park bank robbery, and therefore, just didn't really have a great case. And so therefore, years go by, and eventually LaJoy, DiArgento, and Shang, they do flip on, spoiler, they flipped on Willie Potatoes Dodano and Richard Kane for doing these lie detector tests in the motel that we just talked about. So thanks to our justice system, if you do the crime and you do a violent holdup, that's fine. If we want the guys who tried to cover it up for you for political reasons, we'll get them instead of the actual violent criminals. I'm not saying Dodano and Kane were not violent criminals, but in the case of the Franklin Park bank robbery, they were just accessories. So something to frown at a little bit as well. I mentioned gambling debts as well, which I think is just a variable that I think needs to kind of continue to be at the forefront when we think about Michael LaJoy, and as we've kind of gone along and started to think about the different background data and cases against both of these perpetrators, where Michael LaJoy was a known gambling addict. That's in the FBI transcript from a witness, an FBI witness, that said that he was known to run up huge gambling debts, horse racing debts. And one thing that I found just very interesting one day, and I can't remember if I did share it with you guys, but share my screen here. There is a old newspaper clipping that was saved, I assume, by your dad, Jim, here, and he was also quoted in it.
Bill here.
Yeah, I've seen.
Yeah, so I was reading this and one day just picked it up, and it's a small clipping, and I just turned it over just to see kind of, what it's all about, like what else was going on, what else is on the back, just for nothing. And also found this article right on the back of this about a local oil executive, they call them, just an everyday guy, not a criminal, everyday guy who had $8,000 in horse betting debts and walked right into a bank and held them up because the mob it was time to collect on his gambling debts. And so just an everyday person went in and held up a bank, got caught right away. But that's what the investigators were saying his motive was that it was time to collect. And so one thing that I do think about at this time, knowing that, and knowing kind of the pressure that some of these other syndicate robbers were facing, was maybe it was a big collection time for a lot of, you know, the outfit syndicate members. Maybe a lot of them were collecting their debts, and it was, you know, time for everyone to pay up, and they, you know, just seemed to be a lot going on in terms of gambling debts. So it's one thing to consider. As you know, 60 years later, it's hard to find hard evidence, but so we're just kind of thinking about all these different variables that may add up. But I found that really fascinating. It was right on the back of this newspaper clipping, and it was, you know, it was something I was already thinking about with LaJoy. So it's something for us to consider.
I had a question about the lie detector. Did all these guys know that it was Kane who was kind of administering and providing the device and all of this at the time, or did they later find that out when they were called to testify against him in his own trial?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would assume that they did not know at the time of the lie detector test that it was something to do with Richard Kane, even though the only thing that they said they saw was the sheriff's vehicle in the parking lot, which would have been county property that Kane's partner, William Witzman, drove to the motel to administer the test. He, of course, was adamant that he had nothing to do and knew nothing about who these guys were that he was running the tests on, but just that his partner, Richard Kane, said in their, you know, private, you know, in their private business partnership to just go and administer these tests and get paid for it. Dodonna was across the street. You know, I think the gun on top of the lie detector test is a little bit of a tip off probably for Witzman to believe that, yeah, this is not just standard lie detector tests. This is, you know, something mob related. But of course, he said he didn't know, and that he only found out later when he read Patrick Shane's name in a newspaper that these were bad guys, and that you know, he was willing to testify against Kane later that Kane ordered these tests, and even though he did them, Kane ordered the tests. So just another thing to kind of consider in the vast context of all this is that there's just, I mean, Kane was hardly involved in the lie detector tests other than administering them. And there's no hard evidence that he did order them to administer the tests. It's just all based on the testimony of and statement of William Witzman, his partner, and really goes to show you the lengths that the feds went to try to pin Richard Kane down in the fall of 1968. So it's a good
It's really
question.
interesting to me how, like, Witzman was just instructed to go administer these lie detector tests. There's a gun, they put a gun on it, like, and he was just like, okay, I'm just gonna do these tests, I guess. And then at the same time, the guys who were called in for the test saw the squad car and also were, I don't know, maybe not like very spooked by it. It's just interesting how many layers of like double crossing and double agents there were in this, and that they all kind of just went along.
Agreed. Yeah, 100%. It's quite a cast of characters that were in the midst of all this. Yeah. And I think there was also, if I can remember correctly, something that I think Michael Caine told me this, that Richard ended up, I think, having an affair with William Witzman's ex-wife or something like that. And then Witzman had an affair with his wife. It was something just really just too much. Just stop, guys. Just find other people. But just weird, just a weird relationship between the two that ended with Witzman just being, you know, kind of fed up. But yeah, so there's lie detector tests. And then I don't know about you guys, but I'm really excited to cover the and talk to you guys and hear your guys' opinions on the chase at the Country Club motel that happened. which
Yeah,
was, yeah, which was really,
I don't know if you know. I Jimmy doesn't that parts.
Mom, I love you.
Really?
I didn't hear what you said. I'm really sorry because I know I want to hear that. I just didn't hear what you said. I think you said Jim has not heard or knows about this apprehension, right? Got it. Will do. Thank
I
you.
think you speak a little slower, Mom. Your microphone might work a little better. Not like
Okay,
speaking too fast, it's just not working for some reason.
yeah, I don't know why not, but okay.
That's
Thanks.
a case, yeah.
Is that good?
Yeah, I think it's just not keeping up with the, I don't know.
Okay, thank you, honey.
Yeah.
I'm gonna share this and kind of go through it a little bit because it's hard for me to remember all these details without going directly into it. But um, this is June of 1964, June 11th, and a lot was going on at the time. This is about 3 months into the investigation. One thing that, just the pessimist in me can't not say, but this is also 3 days before the Chicago Tribune expose on Terry's life and death. The Portrait of a Dead Hero was published. So I think just a little bit of pressure to move something in the case, but um, regardless, there were just these police officers who I think were attracted to the Country Club Motel that night because of the clientele. Yes, the clientele that we mentioned at the Country Club Motel was usually a little bit seedy, but at the time there were actually members of Tony Accardo's family staying overnight because his daughter was getting married. Fact check me if I'm not completely accurate on that, but essentially, I think the police were just kind of going, searching cars, kind of looking in windows, and they find a car that has a bunch of burglary tools in it, and yeah, the Forest Park police were running the plates, and they find this car, and it's the equipment in it is things to break into places and burglarize, and they said that it was ready to be used in a crime in the near future. So the police sort of staked out this car in the parking lot, and Sergeant James Walsh was there kind of giving orders. So he was the Cook County sergeant. It's an important name to remember, James Walsh, who was partners with John Flood, who we will also bring up. So two really, really good officers, James Walsh and John Flood. James Walsh is kind of running the operations there. They're positioning the cars around the motel, and um, then the actual two guys pull up in the green Oldsmobile, and it's Peanuts Painsco and Joseph DiArgento. So DiArgento is out on bond at the time for the Franklin Park robbery that we just mentioned that happened at this point 9 months previously. And then, they go to arrest the guys. DiArgento gets in the car, kind of backs out, hits a tree at the end of the motel parking lot. Sergeant Walsh points the, gun at Painsco. Painsco just, goes down. He's under arrest. He's done this dozens and dozens of times before in his life at that point. DiArgento, though, being out on bond, being in possession of, guns and, illegal paraphernalia, swerves around, backs out, hits a tree at the end of the motel parking lot, and then jumps out of the car. I think bullets were flying at that point because Walsh had a machine gun, so was shooting the machine gun in that direction. D'Argento stumbled out of the car and went running through River Forest, in particular, right near Thatcher Woods and really close to Keystone Avenue in River Forest. And the officers run down and go to apprehend him, and he was flying and just running and running and running. So there, right there is a picture of Sergeant Walsh. You can tell just from the top line headline there is, you know, they did apprehend these guys, and you can't really see it there, but that huge thing in his left hand is this machine gun, and he's kind of showing the reporters where the bullet hole was in the stolen car. I think that's just a really good picture. The proud policeman right there. And then 20-30 minutes into the search, D'Argento ran through Thatcher Woods. He was at the railroad tracks that, Jim, I know you and your brothers played at when you were little. And here's, D'Argento, he was running through that area being chased by the police. And then he does this thing where he buys an orange juice from somebody in the middle of the chase. Hey, I know running's hard. Got some runners here in our group, but I don't know if orange juice is like, some sort of, great running formula, and especially when you're being chased by the police, I'm not sure it's the best choice. So the police find the guy who sold the orange juice to him, and they're like, yeah, he went that way. And then, so just kind of a weird thing, I think I put it in the footnote here. Yeah, I had to
It was
put it.
the milkman, right? Wasn't it the milkman?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't know they also, I guess maybe that was their only option, milk and orange juice. Maybe they didn't have water.
Yes, I don't know how people bought beverages in 1964, but it was a weird system. No offense. But yeah, so this is the one part of the police report here that just really caught me up a little bit too. And as we just look for little small, I don't know, clues or circumstantial evidence, which is really kind of, the task of this whole project and just trying to put these pieces together, is Sergeant Jack Moran joins the chase. And remember, there's dozens of police officers who are joined to the chase and who are trying to track down D'Argento running through River Forest. Jack Moran comes out of nowhere and is listed in the police report very specifically that he joined the chase. And I think this is important for really one reason, and that reason is that Jack Moran was one of Richard Kane's henchmen.
Oh.
And if there are, I'm sure I'm not going to explain this the best I can, but if a radio call goes out for assistance in the Cook County headquarters and the Special Investigations Unit that Richard Kane is the head of, remember, he's connected to the outfit, and they say, we've got Peanuts Paints go, he's going to probably send somebody that way to go check on the scene and check on the outfit connected people that are involved in the crime. So Jack Moran showing up completely out of the blue is, I don't think, random. And I don't think it's random that it's in the police report. And I think when James Walsh wrote this police report, he just made sure to put it in there because I think he just found it interesting that he was there. There's nothing else about it in the police report, but remember, there's just dozens of police officers there, and then this one guy who's really low on the totem pole as far as the police hierarchy shows up. He's there, and it's part of the report.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hey,
Okay,
Hey,
great. Hello. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that was by mistake. I mean, if I were a good cop, knowing how corrupt everything was around me, that is the way it's like a silent protest almost, right? Like, I can put this in my report, I'm going to document it. I can't say anything straight to their face, but I'm going to put this in there, and maybe years later, someone else will also find this suspicious. Clearly, Welsh and Flood seem to be onto the inside corruption inside the police force. So I have to
Totally.
say, I
Yep.
like their approach. I like them calling people out like that without necessarily. It's like a way to call them out that no one outside of the force is really going to know it, but the guys inside know that they know.
Yeah. What was he doing there? Right.
Exactly. How convenient that this is the guy who shows up.
Totally. And yeah, so we caught it.
Hold on
Go
one
ahead.
second, Tom. Yeah.
And he was pointing to the passenger door where the bullet hole was. Is that where Pansco was?
That would have been where it's a good question because I think Paintsville pulled up. Let me see. Just trying to remember the details. D'Argento is driving
Yeah.
the
It seemed like
Oldsmobile.
they said Pansco was just very, very compliant always with cops. He didn't carry a gun, and he would always just let them know, hey, I'd never carry a gun. If you guys ever point a gun at me, don't shoot. I'll get on the ground.
Yeah, and so I think that D'Argento pulled up, was going to drop him off at the car that had all the burglary tools in it. They say, hey, put your hands up. D'Argento's already behind the wheel, so he backs up, and then shots are fired at D'Argento, the car that D'Argento's in, and he goes flying down the ravine and through River Forest, Thatcher Woods, etc. So machine gun bullets were flying and at D'Argento, and so he was spooked for sure.
I have to say, every time we read one of these things, it always makes me think of a movie, like just like a movie script. It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Totally. And
Yeah, and like one you can't really make up though, right? It's the stranger than fiction type thing.
Right.
Those who were arrested. Look at
yeah,
that.
100%. So this was just
And Park and Oak.
and I think Jim, I think you're seeing this map for the first time.
Yes.
That so you got the Country Club Motel there on the west portion of the map, down into again the machine gun fires. D'Argento goes down into the ravine, runs southeast across Thatcher Avenue into like a residential area of River Forest, is arrested third of a mile, Google Maps says, from 347 Keystone. And this would have been June 11th, 1964.
And there were helicopters.
Yeah, there was helicopters and just a lot going on.
Yeah, I was in Alaska at the time.
Wow.
And it was pre-planned by a year, but after Terry's death, I was kind of going to drop the idea for a while, but then I just thought I'd just be better for me to personally just to take myself out of this angst that I constantly felt. Yeah, I didn't know that hurt at all. But as you can all tell, that was our stomping grounds as kids, all over that space there. Friends there, a million memories there.
And it was not
Sorry,
Yeah.
Mom, can you say that again?
Say it slower, Mom. Say it slower.
And it was not the Argento's stomping ground.
No.
Right. Now, Tony Accardo lived in River Forest,
Mhm.
which for the wedding purposes at the time is logistically makes sense why he would put some family up at the country club motel. Because he didn't live too far away. And I don't know how many motels were around there, but it's probably one of the closest.
And the
And
Leiden.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, this was really kind of crazy thing to see here. And I just, continue to, as the research, my research has gone along, the like the kind of passive role that Thatcher Woods represents in all of this. It just keeps coming up in these weird ways with all of these different angles of the research, and there will be more. This is not the last time it comes up. It comes up at least two, if not three more times in further readings. But this was definitely one that really threw me for a loop because Jim, I talked to Tom a couple years ago, and he was talking so much about how much you all played in that area as kids on the railroad tracks and in the forest, and just to kind of see a police chase like this go right through that area that's pertinent because after they're arrested for this, the Niles police has a bulletin out for those two on suspicion of the Golf Mill Sears robbery, and they apprehended them as a result of this chase, which is why this chase is part of the greater project here, is that they're apprehended by Forest Park Police and Cook County Police, and then Niles says, bring them up here. We have some interest with these guys. They put them in a show up, bring some Sears employees back who were there. Again, it's 3 months from the crime. And so the eyewitnesses, I think, they were all there that day. And of course, I'm sure they want to, play their part or, are doing their earnest best to identify somebody. And they do actually. So what they say here is, D'Argento was in company of Paul Painsco. Car had guns, masks, gloves, and burglar tools in it. Subjects were booked by County Division 1, which is actually in Niles. So it would have been just, I think, 2 blocks away from Niles Police is where Cook County Division 1 was. So Painsco was in a show up with D'Argento and 4 other subjects. Both were seen at Sears Department Store Golf Mill prior to the March 14th robbery homicide. That's there I'm reading off of. Painsco's arrest record matched D'Argento's except for one sentence. Painsco was suspected of being a physical resemblance to the robbers in the Sears holdup on March 14th, 1964. So what's strange about this is, I think no matter which way you cut it, whether Painsco was there at the Golf Mill Sears or LaJoy was there at the Golf Mill Sears, D'Argento in both theories is there no matter what. And the police here are saying just Painsco matches the resemblance. And so found that, kind of interesting. And then right after their arrest, the Niles police report for the first time that they actually found a palm print at the scene at Golf Mill. No match of the palm print for either Painsco or D'Argento. But remember, they're burglars. They were wearing gloves. So I don't really understand where this piece of evidence comes from. It seemed really random to me. Again, I'm a little bit of a pessimist, a little bit more critical with these things. but they find a palm print. They arrest Painsko and DiArgento. Nothing really comes of the palm print. And again, I got to say, like I opened up the conversation, it was just days before that Tribune article was by Ridgely Hunt was going to come out. And so I think there was maybe just I don't know. I don't want to say too much, but we'll just leave it at that. This is actually a picture of Painsko in a lineup. You can see him second from the left there. To his left, or to his right, to our left, is his brother Pops. So there are two Painsko brothers on the left. I don't know who else is in the lineup there. You guys can see that picture, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think the other thing too, just to consider when we think about the eyewitnesses, is the burglars, robbers, hold up men, stick up men. They're referred to a lot of things. They're wearing head to toe disguises, including hats, masks, trench coats, gloves. You know, really all you could see is maybe how tall they are. They also, their back of their necks were uncovered because, you know, where the trench coat is and where the hat is, they, you know, were not covered there. So the eyewitnesses end up saying, well, yeah, you know, there was some redness on one of the guys' back of his necks, and they were this body type and this tall. So they're putting
Was there a limp too? Did Painsko limp or something?
Yes, which is very, very important. Thanks, Mike. They also identified that the burglar who took the shot had sort of a shuffling limp, which of course it's kind of, it would have been a little bit hard to identify if they were mostly running through the store. But regardless, that was said by the witnesses that there was a sort of a limp, like just what they call a shuffling gait. And that was apparently unique to Painsko in the eyes of Niles police. But in the tape that we all listened to for this book club, was also that Michael LaJoy also had a limp. So they both had some kind of a limp, but Michael LaJoy definitely did, according to the story that was told by Martin Tajra in the tape to John Shields, saying that, yeah, LaJoy had a limp because he tried to knock off somebody. Somebody did a robbery by the name of Scalise, Jerry Scalise, I think it was, committed a robbery, and then LaJoy tried to like take a bigger piece that was his or steal the loot from him, and to teach LaJoy a lesson, they shot him in the leg, and he walked with a limp ever since. So again, if they're looking for someone with a limp, you know, they should be looking for anybody who's is in a burglary crew that has a limp, not just dead set on Painsko
And from a medical perspective, if you have a shuffling gait, like a true shuffling gait, like you're not able to run, like you're not jogging, and then like you just have the gait when you're walking. So that's something too. If all those robbers were running around and Painsko had a true shuffling gait, I mean, he's not going to be the most athletic. I don't know, like if they're just describing it that way or if that's really what it was, but
Yeah. Well, DiArgento's really doing running, right?
say that slower, Mom.
DiArgento is really doing the running.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
But they were trying to say like, oh, there was somebody limping because they
Right.
noticed that.
yes,
And then they were like, oh, Painsko has a shuffling gait,
yes,
but that's not the same as like running with a limp. That's closer to LaJoy and the description of LaJoy and his ailment.
oh, good, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So that kind of further exonerates or calls into question Pansko being the shooter.
Yeah, if it's a true shuffling gait, I don't really know obviously how he walked, but
That's great, Carr. Very interesting.
Thank you, Carl.
It seems to me that, at least for the Niles, whatever his name is, Ed. What's his name? The Niles Dennis. That's Ed Dennis. It really feels like he started with his conclusion and was trying to work backwards on how do I catch this guy? What do I need to plant on him? What do I need to say? What I need to put in the eyewitness's mind when they're looking at this lineup to get them to say enough where I get this guy.
And you hear
And
that
if-
again.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's not about justice. That's the part that's irritating me. It's really about him wanting to get hands going. That's really all it is for him. It's not who's the killer.
Yeah.
How do I get
Yeah.
the guy?
And you hear that again and again in the audio tape. It's like whenever, who was it, Shields was trying to share the tape with someone who might care. They're
Yeah.
like, nope, it's Pansko. Why are you showing me this again and again?
That's
And
right.
Tom, didn't you say you kind of talked to Dennis and he was super, was it him or was it somebody else that was super defensive when you contacted Niles?
It was somebody else in the department. Unfortunately, I never got to interview Dennis. I think he passed away in like 2016. But one of the older members of the force, who's just now on as kind of like a part-time, called me when I put the FOIA request in and was asking why I was asking around about this, and that, they felt like this case was pretty much closed, and considered, unofficially considered it closed, because they, thought that Pansko was the perpetrator. And the FOIA request yielded just one single PDF file of all of the different paperwork that they had left on the Zilligan case. And this police report about apprehending Pansko was the bulk of the file that remains in the Niles police register. So it's clear that they sort of have all of the documentation that was leading to Pansko being the suspect. And with a case like this, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, there would be both Jims, correct me if I'm wrong, there would be hundreds of pages, if not thousands, about an investigation like this. It was a 25-page PDF.
No question. It would have been a box filled, a banker's box filled with notes. So they probably threw it away because of the age and the time and everything that had happened. Hey, I have a question. I know you mentioned this before. Maybe we're going to get to it later, but how did the murder charge against Pansko get dropped? Are we going to get to that later on?
Yeah, let's get to it. See, I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen so I can kind of run through this article a little bit quicker and not give you guys a headache by scrolling.
It's that because to me that's the fascinating part of this this whole thing. And I think somebody mentioned it earlier. Maybe it was Maggie, Peggy there, that you have this this horrific crime, and that should have been first and foremost on anyone's radar screen, and yet they're using these informants for burglars. And that's what's so mind-boggling about this, that the most serious of all crimes has just really been hidden away and obfuscated because of nonsense, burglar charges. And that's what I'm getting from all this. And that's what's just shattering to me the more I learn about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you look at the fingers pointing to Pansko, it's not just the Niles Police Department who are kind of pointing fingers at Pansko. It's definitely the Chicago Police Department as well, who would have had, from my understanding, more of a patriarchal influence on all of these local outfits or sorry, local police departments. And so there's definitely that sort of, I think, downward pressure coming from Dennis, and then under the Niles Police Department, and then upward pressure too from the community that, you know, was really still struggling with just an awful death. And by community, I mean not just in Niles, which I think this completely was shocking to Niles because it happened at a place that was pretty sacrosanct in the Sears department store nearby, where people spent, you know, big times of their weekends, but then also in River Forest too, where Terry was quite a local legend, right?
Well, it would be like, excuse the reference for the pun, but it would be like killing two birds with one stone, getting Painsko, because he was like pissing a lot of them off, right? And never getting caught for anything. And so they were like, and they were getting pressure to solve the case. So it was like Making a Murderer vibe. If you guys have ever seen that documentary, where they were like, okay, yeah, this would work out really well for us if he was the guy. But they had a motive. I mean, right? That's why that's the theory, and we don't know that as a fact, but that's the theory. Like, he was just getting away with a lot of these robberies, and they like couldn't pin anything on him, and so maybe that's why they were finally like, okay, we can pin this on him.
Yeah, it was.
Or could it have been something more sinister, is what I keep thinking. Could this have been something beyond, hey, let's put the burglar we want to get, who are we covering this up for, is what I'm trying to question. Who was really behind all this? This guy Kane, because I think you mentioned it, Tom, a couple of weeks back, because he was so politically active and there was an election going on. You know, was that what was happening here?
As we will go on, and especially as we read, you know, part 4, which I do hope you guys will all stick with this to read it, because I'm telling you, like, we have all this stuff here early on, but later it all kind of comes into one big trial. All these people were in the same courtroom. But yeah, it really came down to that. It was 1968, September and October of 1968, which was a huge election year. Ed Hanrahan was Ed Hanrahan's office was the prosecutor. He was running for state's attorney. The U.S. Attorney's Office was bringing the charge against Kane, who used to work for Richard Ogilvie, and Ogilvie trusted Kane to head up his special investigations unit at the sheriff's office, and they were trying to stain his name, Ogilvie's name, by tying him to Kane, and they did pretty well, but Ogilvie still won the trial. But it was absolutely the centerpiece and kind of, I think, reason that the indictment was brought. And they brought it against Kane too for his role in the motel room lie detector test, and you could see, like, it's very slim evidence.
Yeah.
And then I think one really important thing too is that probably opening another can of worms here, but in my discussions with Sergeant Flood, who was James Walsh's partner, and is you all read about sort of the connection between them and Painsko, they apprehended Painsko because they thought something was afoot with Niles police and Chicago police, that they were going to assassinate Painsko with the murder warrant that they had from this show up. The only person that knew about the murder warrant and had it on his person was Lieutenant Dennis. And once Flood and Walsh found out about that, they went and they picked up Painsko, and from Flood's account, they knew something was off about it. Painsko was somebody that they knew well, and, obviously had an adversarial relationship with, but being, given his stature, they knew him, and had arrested him before. They brought in Peanuts Painsko when they found out about the murder warrant, called Lieutenant Dennis at Niles. and said, "We have your guy over here. We understand you have a murder warrant for him." The John Flood's word in how Lieutenant Dennis responded to that was that he was surreptitious in his response. That, "Oh, I don't have a, what are you talking about? I'm not sure what you mean." Then I think what's telling is in the Niles police report that when they served the warrant to Painsco and arrested him for murder, I'll share this line here because really it's hard to you could just see it here. So Peanuts Painsco was there. Lieutenant Dennis noticed a 1964 lime-colored Cadillac convertible parked at the Cook County Police Station at 9000 North Milwaukee Avenue. The officers immediately recognized this auto as being one of Paul Painsco's autos. So, sure, did they accidentally just see Painsco parked at the Cook County headquarters and say, "Oh, we have a murder warrant for that guy. Let's go get him"? Or did John Flood and James Walsh call them and say, "We have your guy over here, come get him"? And to cover their own butts, they said, "Oh, we just happened to notice his car was there, so we found him."
And then sentence like doesn't even make sense to me. So they then stopped their auto and went inside to the station. What? Where they were informed by Sergeant Walsh, "Oh, Painsco's here."
Yes.
Like, what? Okay, so then you saw the car, and then instead of investigating the car or investigating the area around the car, or wait, am I wrong? Wait, go up a little bit. Okay, so they said they noticed, that it was parked at the police station.
Yeah.
So, that's really weird. Okay, so they were just they said they were just driving by the Niles police station randomly and noticed the car.
Yeah.
It doesn't add up. I don't know. That story is just weird.
So, above the highlight, the official report contradicted Sergeant Flood's account. So yes.
Well, yeah, for sure. But I'm just trying to look at just the report and seeing and looking at how that just doesn't make a lot of sense
Oh, I get it.
on
I
its own.
totally agree. It's like he's trying to be cute and smart
It's
about it and
weird.
cover his tracks. And
Yeah.
to me, this is like blatantly obvious that you are covering your tracks. Not even good at it. I mean, come on, ridiculous.
Right.
Like you're driving by another police station, you happen to see a car. I mean, that's just it's so ludicrous. You know, it didn't go down that way. Clearly, they got a phone call. We're asked to come to the police station because otherwise, why would they go there?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
that's when they see the car and they go, "Oh yeah, I guess that's Painsco's car." But come on, I mean, it's ludicrous. This is seriously irritating me with Niles. Like it makes me want to call them up and be like, "What the hell?"
Yeah.
But I know no one there is probably still working. So, but come on.
It's bad. This is another line that I think is very suspect is that Lieutenant Edward Dennis had the warrant in his custody at the time of Painsco's arrest. So
yeah. What
is
is
They're
driving.
randomly walking around with them. Come
Yeah.
So
on.
he is.
Yeah.
He is like I would say he did have it on his person, which doesn't sound normal. I know it was a big
No.
crime. He had it, but it does speak to Flood's theory that he was driving around looking for him on his own,
Yeah.
wanted to find him in a compromising spot, pull him over, and just kill Painsco in the street. That was this is what John Flood's theory is about what happened, is that this was kind of the scenario they wanted to play out. Kill Painsco for the Zilligan murder, be a hero, everybody's happy, everybody wins, except of course for Terry's family, who would have been lied to about who did the murder. I mean, even if there was a chance Painsco did it, it's not 100% certainty, but the Zilligans would have been the losers in that scenario. And I'm grateful that it didn't happen. And it happened the way that, I'm really glad I got in touch with John Flood, who told me
Yeah.
this. And for this next round of readings, whoever's, able to stick with this, I will give you a YouTube video to watch where I recorded my conversation with John Flood, and he will recount this and his memory of it. So that is something that I do have. He has not given me, he's not giving me any inclination that he's willing to put his statement or anything on the record. And of course, it's not necessarily evidence; it's his account of what happened 60 years ago. But he's very adamant, and I think he's every time I talk to him, which has been many a time, he is just very, very he's very trustworthy.
Consistent.
Yeah, consistent and trustworthy.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is, and to Jim, your point, this leads to an indictment, a grand jury that looked into the evidence against Painsco and did not file charges and did not pursue an indictment. I'm saying that the wrong way, based on the evidence at hand.
Yeah, they returned a no bill, but do you know how rare that is? And I've mentioned this a couple of weeks back. It's extremely, extremely rare. You bring a case in front of the grand jury because you are going to get an indictment.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I just wonder how that went down. I know you probably don't have the court records, and it's all private. It's sealed, but that never happens. I don't know 1964 compared to when I was there in the 80s and 90s, but any case you want indicted, the grand jury gave it to you. And it's so unusual to me that they brought back a no bill on this.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Which to me points out that they're doing this backwards, right? They started with the guy they wanted, and they're trying to create the case against him.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, you don't take something to a grand jury unless you think you are going to get that,
No.
right?
Otherwise,
you don't
there
just
would
take
be
random.
evidence.
Yeah, exactly. You don't randomly say, hey, let's just put this before the grand jury and see if we can get them to sign off on it, which is, to me, what this looks like. Like, we've put together what we think we can. Let's see if we can get the grand jury, who pretty much rubber stamps everything, right? That's kind of the idea of the grand jury. Like, you've got your case. You're going to them to just say, hey, we need to go ahead on behalf of the people so we can get this guy. But this is the opposite. We want this guy. Now let's get the blessing from the grand jury so we've got the cover to go get.
It also doesn't really smell right to me that even after that happened and the grand jury kind of threw it out, that Niles PD still maintained that Peanuts was the guy, and they were, reluctant to even entertain any other sort of suspects. Like, I don't know if that's common, if someone is found innocent or their case is thrown out, like if it's still common for law enforcement to assert that they were guilty.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think about, and I'm glad we listened to the tapes in advance of this meeting, because you think about when John Shields approached Ed Dennis in the federal building and had the Martin Tajra and Sam Felici tapes and said, here's evidence for your 64 case. Listen to this. And Ed Dennis said, as you alluded to, Mike, we already have what we consider as a partial solution to the case, and that Painsco was our guy. Now, I also, just from a human perspective, want to think about Ed Dennis as someone who I think was doing his earnest best in the, context of being a police officer in the 60s and going up against the mob and having all this stuff going on. It would have been very difficult. He was really in the middle of all of this. But at some point, if we, do believe in John's story, which I do personally, he would have had to rationalize at some point to himself that I am going to kill somebody, pull over Painsko and kill somebody. And that takes a lot, I think, to go to that step in your mind that you're going to kill somebody, but then someone's going to tell you later that actually you would have been killing somebody for, a reason that was wrong. I don't think he would have ever come off of that logical step, because he's already gone it so far to be ready to kill for that rationale and that theory. And I don't think you're going to take the lead, even if he's the lead detective, and make him change his mind because of what he was willing to do. So certainly, when we think about whether this was Paul Painsko or not, there's quite a case that you can build against him, and there's quite a case that you can not, say that it was not him. And the case against him is pretty slim. We've sort of talked about all of the different ways and covered the different ways in which this seems like it's a Painsko robbery. Just in terms of his method and the different methods that he would use on a heist, which we've covered in the background research on Painsko. I told you guys about everything. It's going to seem like some things are a waste of time and I'm taking you down a rabbit hole, but that's why why I did all that research on Painsko and the different burglaries that he does, to show you his kind of usual methodology. And so then you compare it to the 64 robbery, and it's just, it adds up in certain ways, but not others. And then you think about where he was at the time, being a notorious thief. Would he go and risk it all to hold up a mall in the middle of the day based on the professional level of criminality that he was accustomed to? I don't think so. Certainly that would contradict what Niles police, the professionals, said at the time. I don't think so. But a lot going on here, and I'm curious to hear everyone's thoughts on the case against Painsko and the case, for what we have so far against LaJoy or someone else.
I have a question / observation, I guess. So in the tapes, they asked, or Tajra is telling the story of what LaJoy and D'Argento was telling him. And he said just outright, oh yeah, they left the getaway car at the hospital. Was that something that was like known to the media at all? Or would that have been a fact that, yeah, that was?
Yes.
Okay, I wonder if there's anything in his testimony that like wasn't known to the media, because if there's something in there that was not public knowledge,
you're right.
Just substantiates his entire story. Like, how would he know that except coming from the people that were directly involved? So we should look into like what is in there that was known, and then what is in there that is not known, and hopefully we can find something. But I thought that might have been one of the facts. But I guess if that was known to the public, then it was known to the public.
So yeah, so that's research that I've performed, and what I think the biggest detail that I think that he spills in there, among others, there are a lot of details where when you put it all together, it's like he knows a thing or two. He's heard about this at length.
Sure. Yeah.
But the biggest detail, I think, is the lamps that he said they knocked over in the process. And he says that they knocked over some lamps. And when you go back and you look at the photograph of the crime scene, they're right next to a bunch of like large lamps in the hallway, in the aisle of Sears is right where it happened. So you see that in the photo, but nowhere in any of the police reports or anything or articles is it written that they knocked over lamps. But that's what he said that LaJoy was joking about, was that, yeah, they knocked over some expensive lamps in the process. And when you see the picture of the lamps in the aisle, that's one thing that I really think circumstantially is spot on. That and
Mom said the minute details of the actual shooting. Like,
so in terms of the fact that instead of just shooting, taking the shot, there was a sort of a bit of a struggle. It was like a wrestling going on beforehand. Yeah, that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's not in any of the articles, is it? I don't remember that in an article. Yeah.
Correct.
What about the when the assailant when Terry was wrestling, he said, "Get this MF off of me." That was also something that seemed to match in what Tajra reported from the story from the prison. So was that also a piece of sort of a minute detail that was known publicly, or
You're right.
sort of like you had to be there kind of thing?
That one too was kind of like a detail that, could he have made that up? Okay, but why? It was a very specific line that he said. Was that, LaJoy was yelling out to him was to get this motherfucker off of me, was what he said.
D'Argento was yelling that.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
And then said later, Mike saved my life.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the way he said it was that LaJoy saved my life and that he's my blood brother because of that.
disgusting.
It's just like it's so gross. And I think they, would have done other crimes together too, but just like really, really like subhuman people. Like, sorry, I'm trying to keep it objective. I say I'm trying to be an objective administrator of these conversations, but
I think objectively they were subhuman. So that's
thank you.
What was it? Shields, I think, said they were animals. And then he said, at some point, he said that's disrespectful to animals.
Actually, it was Tajra who said that, who's on the death row calling them. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Because I remember the part where he says, you don't ask these guys, like, he just listened to the story. You don't ask these guys questions. So, like he didn't get the details or he couldn't ask the questions to get the details of the crime. He just has to listen to these guys. Because if you don't, then they turn on you, right? So, and that guy, was it the D'Argento who wanted to kill everybody? Like, clearly he was paranoid.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that Tajra was so willing to just tell Shields like everything about this conversation that he allegedly had. And I think it came up in the 1983 recording with the family that was he just trying to somehow get the reward money for himself? I mean, he expressed that he thought it should go to the family, but like, was that legitimate, or was he trying to serve his own self-interests? Or, you wouldn't expect someone who's on death row, I guess, who's done horrible crimes themselves to suddenly have an interest in justice, but maybe he did. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a hard one to rationalize, that these guys came forward and said this. However, I think when you think about the timing of this the recording would have taken place in May of 1968. And it was at the time the indictments were being prepared, and I think by then presented. This will be all kind of covered in part 3, presented against Kane and everybody else, but the informants were already government informants and would have been frowned upon quite a bit that they were informants. And so former friends of theirs would have become, you know, enemies and garnered a little bit of, I don't know, some kind of respect or something with the outfit and the syndicate if they were coming out and speaking against and helping the case of the outfit. So I wouldn't say that they, you know, they had these, you know, perfectly well intentioned, you know, great intentions, but there is a lot of truth to it. And I think when John Shields says this, when you listen to these guys, it's just not something that they could have created out of their own imagination, telling these stories. You can't just come up with all this stuff. And he's just talking at length about he's switching timelines, and he's talking about details and things that happened. And he's just letting it all off of his chest, it sounds like. And I really wish that we had the other tape too, to compare them, but we have what we have all these years later, and we're just trying to, you know, use the pieces of circumstantial evidence that we have. But I think you can tell that when someone is being credible or not, no matter what.
And of course, he's a police, and you know, he's a detective, and so he's heard a lot of lies, and he's heard a lot of folks telling the story as they remember it. So he's a good source to hear on that.
I also thought it was credible that Tadja, is that how you say his name? When he says he's kind of piecing it together himself, because he just listened to the story. So this guy's just spewing, probably, like you said, to get it off of his chest. And he's trying to put together the story as it really occurred, right? Because he probably heard pieces over the 2 years. Here's the one story, here's the next story, and it kind of probably all comes in piecemeal. And he's saying, this is how I think it went down. It just,
of course,
this whole story just leaves me with how much people are just out for themselves, and you know, it seems there's like 3 good cops. There's Shields, there's Flood, and Walsh, and the rest of everybody else is just trying to work whatever angle it is they think serves them. And it's a sad story on Chicago's criminal and legal world.
It does seem like that.
And Shields even a cop himself? I mean, he was like the head of security at Sears, right? And it seems like he
yeah.
kind of just took matters into his own hands to try and solve this, which I thought was pretty incredible.
Right.
Yeah, and I think he kind of got to the end of the line for him, you know, almost 20 years later. And I think he was one of the sources behind the Arpatak article that came out in 1983 and about the potential for that the FBI gave these criminals a pass in a murder in order for them to be informants. And right at that exact time is right when he met with the family, and I think he gave the family the tapes and just had to say, like, here's what I think happened. And you know, we've picked up that work, you know, many years later, but it's really important steps that he took. And I think he even talks about, you know, they had other leads that went nowhere, and he hired some off-duty Chicago police officers to look into it. So there was a lot of investigation going on the private side of the Sears side, and they still had the $25,000 reward outstanding. And I think as a corporation, like, that was just like, it was an important thing for them to resolve. That was a really shocking thing in their corporate history, you know, their shared history. And so they had an interest in it. And then he had an interest in it personally, because even though he was a regional director, he was at Niles Golf Mill that day. And it kind of happened under his nose, even though he was, you know, the Midwest chief of security. And so I think he really took it personally too, that it all happened. And of course, having his own differences with Dennis was certainly a driving force for him to kind of keep the investigation as alive as he could. Well, there's a lot of different variables and things we can, discuss. I don't want to keep you guys for too much longer on your Sunday. I know we lost the hour already, so but just again, I want to say how just appreciative I am of these conversations we've been having. So of course, if anybody wants to say anything else or bring anything else in, I'll leave that open to you all, unless you want to talk about our continuation and thinking about our next meeting.
Well, this Thursday,
Yeah.
if we can all be mindful during the day of the 60th anniversary, I think that would be good.
Absolutely. Thursday being 60 years from when Terry left. And just that's a long time. It's a long time ago. But I'm sure it doesn't feel like that long to those, who were there, you two on the call over there.
Tom, I just want to thank you again. Your research on this is really astounding. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Definitely
you, Tom.
more information than I ever had heard about it. So thank you for putting together some of these pieces for us.
Yeah. In Terry's honor.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm just glad to share. I'm just glad to share it. I'm just glad to share it. Well, yeah, so we'll maybe touch base on Thursday about, the anniversary, send a reminder out, and it's I know there's a mass going on as well on Thursday, that I think Missy and Terry are putting together in Villa Park, and then everybody will honor it in their own way too. We've thought of some things, Mom and Jim, about just kind of honoring that day. I'd love to be with you guys in some way.
Good.
Thursday.
Good.
Yeah. But so we'll kind of keep going through this, and I don't know how everybody is feeling about continuing. I am, of course, open to continuing these. We got 2 thumbs up. That's great. So then what's exciting is that we get to get into part 3 of 5. So we're 40% all the way through. So that in terms of parts, and I know there's a lot of reading ahead, but part 3 will focus on the beginning of part 3. The first 3 chapters are about Martin Tajra and Sam Felici's background. And it's just in there because I fell down those rabbit holes and I wasn't willing to not put that research in the manuscript. I had to put it in. There's really fascinating stories behind these 2 guys who ended up giving the interview to John Shields and being on recording. So, but like I'm mentioning that because, if you're a little sleepy during that reading, it's not like crazy pertinent. So that's chapters 24 through 26. And then 27, we will introduce Ed Hanrahan into the story and talk about his background. And then we will get into the FBI's courtship of the unholy 3 that they are alluded to and called later. LaJoy, D'Argento, and Shang, and see how the FBI starts to kind of court them to become witnesses in these readings. So I would say that if it's okay with you guys, that perhaps we meet sometime in the, let's see, since we go to 114. Sorry, I'm just looking at the document. This reading would be about 28 pages. So I don't know how long that would take you guys, but maybe we give it like another 6 weeks since it's a little lengthier of a reading. How do you feel about 6 weeks,
Okay.
28 pages or so?
That sounds good.
Say it again, Jim. I'm sorry, Jim.
This would be my first reading. I've never seen the whole manuscript before, so I'm gonna do it all between now and then. But I really appreciate what you've done. I'll learn a lot today.
Uh-oh, we lost our host.
Sorry, I'm here. I'm just taking.
I'm taking over.
Sorry, I'm just reacting to Jim's comment. Sorry.
Aw.
This is amazing work, Tom.
I totally agree.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Jim, I just want to say that, I've just been thinking of you guys while I've been doing it. And just really good to share.
Thank you. I love it.
And it's Jim's first Zoom ever.
Welcome to the Zoom world.
You did well.
Well, that's great. So yeah, I would say, I will send out the part 3 document. I'll also send out the link to the John Flood interview as well. It's a YouTube link. And we'll kind of continue on from there. I think 6 weeks would put us probably the Sunday, the April 28th. Does anybody have any conflicts that morning, Sunday, the April 28th?
No.
All right, we will hold that time. And I will send out the documents, and I thank you all so much for being with us again. And this is great. I love all you so much, and then just thanks for your engagement on it.
All right.
Thanks all.
Love you guys.
Thanks, Tom. Great work. Take
Love
care,
you.
everyone.
All right.
Good seeing you.
Take care, y'all.
Thanks.
I love you
Well
all.
done, everyone. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.